Hi, my name is Sanitas Jembergas. I am editor of Baltica, and today with us is Holger Roonemaa, who is chief investigator in Estonia and Delfi, and Szabolcs Pany, who is affiliated with Hungarian outlets Direct 36 and Central European outlet Westware. And we're not going to pretend that we see each other first time. We've known each other for a long time. Holger and Szabi was friends and studied in the United States on scholarship. We met Szabi through Holger a few years later, and I looked up in Baltica's website, and in 2018, Szabi was writing for us a story about Hungary's closeness to Moscow and a reaction on poisoning of Sergei Skripal. Normally, I would love to sit with them around the pool with a cocktail and discuss something else, but today we are here to speak about upcoming Hungarian elections and how did our friend Szabolcs, whose name I can't spell for life after all these years, ended up being accused of espionage after he published a story, or even before he published a story about Hungarian foreign minister leaking EU conversations to Russian foreign minister Sergei Lavrov. So, Szabi, let's start with that. What happened before you were accused of being a spy?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me, and it's great to talk, and hopefully we can sit around the table with some coffee soon. Listen, the whole thing, the smear campaign against me started in early March when I first reported that the Kremlin has tasked Sergei Kirienko, the deputy chief of staff of Vladimir Putin, of interfering with the Hungarian elections. He's the architect and main operator of the Moldova elections interference campaign and many other both domestic Russian and other foreign influence campaigns. Information warfare is how the Russians call it. With Holger and also Baltica, we've worked on some stories related to Kirienko and his operations already many years before. So first I learned about that, and then I also learned that 3 men affiliated with the GRU involved in psychological warfare and social media manipulation have arrived to Hungary, to the Russian embassy. And after this report, there came the first wave of the attacks against me, accusing me of trying to create a Russiagate scandal, like at the 2016 US elections, that I'm faking these stories about so-called Russian meddling. It's all fake. And I was attacked already by that time by the faction leader of the ruling party, accused of being a foreign agent. And then what happened is that the government knew about my plans of and my project of investigating Sergei Lavrov's illegitimate collusion with Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó, and they released preemptively edited recording of me talking to a sensitive source about Péter Szijjártó and Lavrov's communication, where in this edited part I was trying to confirm through which channels, which mobile phone numbers Lavrov and Szijjártó are communicating, because I was unable to believe and still unable to believe that these guys are calling through unencrypted GSM mobile lines. And I was trying to find out if there's like a third phone number, like a covered equipment that not even Szijjártó's own people know about, that is used for agent handler communication. So this was intercepted. Either our room was bugged where we were talking, or my source's phone was somehow used as a recording device, and it got leaked and it got spun in a way that I got accused of being a foreign spy, and then later in a very unlogical way they said it out loud that a Ukrainian spy, so I'm being accused of a Ukrainian spy, that I was the one trying to wiretap Péter Szijjártó, conspiring with Ukraine. This was a preemptive strike because the Hungarian government knew for quite some time through my surveillance, and also because I sent questions, that I'm investigating Lavrov and Szijjártó's contacts. So they tried to discredit me, but most importantly, they tried to save Szijjártó from the consequences of these reports, trying to make him the victim of some conspiracy against him where a Ukrainian spy, myself, the investigative journalist, is involved. So this is the story in a nutshell.
You must see some irony in it, that you are the person actually revealing foreign interference in Hungarian elections, and instead of any state that should start like officially investigating what's going on there, they turn the investigation around and against you. But it's just like sounds so Kafkaesque.
It's actually sounds very Soviet. So there's this this very old strategy of the Bolsheviks to accuse your enemies with what you are doing. And we've seen that's actually what Viktor Orbán has been deploying as a communication strategy for many, many years. Accuse your enemies of what you yourself are doing. So I'm not surprised because of that. The other thing that I want to add, just to explain why I'm investigating this, because no one else does. So the Hungarian counterintelligence, as other revelations have recently shown, are quite busy spying on the Hungarian opposition, trying to infiltrate the Hungarian opposition, trying to sabotage their campaign, and also quite busy surveilling journalists, it seems. So in the Hungarian system, if you're a cabinet member, you are receiving the reports from the intelligence agencies and you're giving the tasks to them, meaning that they don't have the power and the authority to investigate if there is a mole on the cabinet level. If there's a Russian mole, if there's a Russian agent in the cabinet, then no intelligence agency in Hungary has the power to investigate that. So that's why I thought, maybe naively, but I still believe this is my task, that if there's no one else, no other player in Hungary who could do that, then it's up to me to carry out this investigation.
Let me be stupid on this moment. Why are you so reckless in Hungary? Is that you are not investigating your own cabinet about spying for the foreign country? Because, Szijjártó was talking to Lavrov. Who knows that there's not someone talking to Chinese or whoever else is considered adversary?
Well, I mean, this is just part of the story, the Russian influence. Obviously, it does not stop there. So we have indication, and I've also been reporting on Chinese influence in Hungary, that China and Chinese espionage and Chinese infiltration of Hungarian decision-making is also quite serious. It's just that they pose a very different type of problem. As some national security officer who worked on China told me, that the Chinese, they don't kill white people. They are not, they're not going after you as a journalist. Of course, they make their own disappear in no second. Like if there's a Chinese national part of the diaspora in Hungary, they can just kidnap him back to China and execute if they want. But they're not going after, for example, a Hungarian journalist. And also their goals and their methods are very different than the Russians. They have a very long-term, decades-long plan of exerting their influence. And in our region, at least, they don't pose a military threat. They don't pose a direct security threat. They're not carrying out sabotage operations. What they're interested in is stealing technology and also economy. So using their intelligence to basically win procurements, big businesses, cut deals with the Hungarian government to build railways and similar things to make money. That's the goal of the Chinese. So in some ways, at least in our region, they are much more peaceful. In Hungary and in Central Europe, at least, compared to the Russians especially, they are engaged in a more peaceful, more economic and technological way of espionage.
Let's go back to Szabolcs and then to Russia. Because we are recording this interview on April 2, and we intend to publish this interview like mid next week, somewhere around April 8, April 9. So Sabi, maybe you can just bring us up to date, but what is the situation around the investigation into you, and what do you expect to happen meanwhile before the audience sees us?
There are multiple things here. Mostly it is the smear campaign that matters. It's a political theater. The main goal of Orbán and their people was to shout through all of their propaganda that Szabolcs Pany is a Ukrainian spy. That's it. That's the main goal. And it's been their communications method that they also say that we're filing criminal charges against this and that person. They do that all the time. In reality, what happens is that even if there's an investigation launched, usually there is, because police and prosecution are under political control, they launch an investigation, but then it's going to get quickly or silently closed. The main goal is to feed the propaganda with the news that authorities are, considering launching an investigation against Szabolcs. I don't fear that, there would be any meaningful investigative steps against me. Maybe they're gonna, interrogate me, but that's it. It's pretty clear that I committed no crime here, and it's also pretty clear it's not in the Hungarian government's interest that I sit down with prosecutors and tell them on the record in an official testimony what I learned about Péter Szijjártó as collusion with Russia. They don't want to have official papers about that, I'm pretty sure. Now, the real danger here is something completely different. There are two dangers. One is that this hate campaign is very widespread. My face is all over the place. You have to know about me that inside Hungary, I never been to a TV studio. I'm not giving these types of interviews when my face appears. I'm only giving like podcast interviews to my own employers because they force me to. It's been my strategy to keep a relatively low profile in Hungary so that I can, sit in a coffee and talk to a sensitive source without being identified. I'm an introvert, so I'm never seeking this type of fame. The problem here that now my face is all over the place, together with the words traitor, spy, Ukrainian spy, and the real danger is that I'm already receiving threatening personal messages and comments, and like everywhere else, and in similar situations that some lunatic, some mentally unstable people could interpret the situation that they are justified to use violence against me, to pull a knife, to pull a gun, something like that. That is a threat that I have to assess, to be honest. The other threat is not coming from the Hungarian authorities, but from the Russian authorities. In such a situation, when I'm open knowledge that I have sensitive information about Russian-Hungarian communication, if the Russians are interested in trying to find out what I have, if they want to break in to my home, if they want to steal my phone, if they want to grab me from the street, can I trust the Hungarian authorities of protecting me under such circumstances? I don't think so. So these two are the threats, not these bogus legal whatever bullshit that they are spitting out in media. The Hungarian authorities are not a threat here.
But I think there are a few other threats as well that I think like one of the goals still to intimidate or to start the investigation against you is to get you away from additional new publications, and not only you, but also other Hungarian journalists, to scare them away from continuing or starting investigations into this. Exactly. And I know, Szabolcs, that you are very seasoned you were one of the targets in Hungary with the Pegasus spyware already, 5-6 years ago. So you're experienced in this, but still, like, what goes through your head when you see that the most powerful people in your country are talking about you as a foreign spy and that threatening you?
Yeah, well, I have very mixed feelings. First of all, like, as you said, I'm a seasoned journalist, so I have sources within the regime. I know how it works. I know like what goes on behind the scenes. And I also understand that what's been happening to me, it's a sign of weakness and panic on their side. Like they really literally shit their pants when they learned what I'm investigating. And it's a sign that they don't have any real ways of trying to prevent me from publishing other than trying to, create this bullshit bogus espionage charges against me. I don't fear them because I know that they're the ones who are afraid, and this attack on me is exactly a sign of that. What you mentioned is actually true. They are also trying to pin me down with all this bullshit, trying to probably also psychologically pressure me. In that regard, they're not really succeeding because whenever there's an intelligence operation against someone, the minus one step that they're taking is that they're creating a psychological profile of the target. Well, if they made a psychological profile of me, they must know that if I'm pressured, then I'm just getting very mad. And I'm like multiplying my energies to carry out my investigation. Main issue was that I've been sick this past few weeks with sore throat and everything. That's why I'm still coughing. So apologies to the audience. But this type of psychological tricks, they don't really work on me. They just give me motivational boost. And also I've received so much love and support and solidarity from the international journalistic community, readers, high school classmates with whom I haven't been in touch for 25 years suddenly reached out to me. Teachers from university reached out to me. So that's just giving me such an extra emotional support that, I cannot even describe, and I'm very grateful for that.
Since you're one of the very few people who will internationally be heard what this smear campaign means, walk us through the steps, because espionage charge was just the end. Before that, for example, I in Latvia was seeing your face on my social media feeds with Samantha Powell and some other people saying that he is colluding with Americans. What are the parts of that campaign?
There has been a smear campaign against OCCRP, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, I think last year. Some disgruntled employee, together with some tankies, some far-left people who just harbor some grudges towards the United States for any reasons. They started accusing the whole OCCRP network of being basically some CIA front. Those so-called journalists who were involved in these, they didn't even think through what would be the consequences to journalists who have affiliation with OCCRP in Central Asia, in India, in Hungary, and other places. So basically what happened is that the Orbán government picked up these reports and started attacking me and Direct 36 and Atatszó in Hungary of being US aid-funded CIA agents, whatever. What you saw of me was a photograph taken, I think, in 2024. Samantha Powell, then head of USAID, was visiting Hungary. There was a small round table with media representatives, and they took a photo of me and the former US ambassador David Pressman to Hungary. I'm actually proud to be in this company and on that photo. Both of them are American patriots who serve their country very well. I'm a Hungarian patriot. And this photo and this whole anti-OCCRP thing was used against me and others to accuse us of being CIA agents and executioners of US interests. So if I can add something, that's what infuriates me both in the United States and the EU, that they are aware of what the Russians are doing through their intelligence gathering, through their political networks. In the case of Sergei Lavrov and Szijjártó's communications, top leaders of the European Union must have known about this for years. It's an open secret. The Washington Post first reported about these leaks a couple of weeks ago. The United States knew about how the Russians are paying off Hungarian government officials. They knew about the vehicles. And for many, many years, they did nothing. The Biden administration did nothing. As a Hungarian citizen and investigative journalist, I'm pretty furious that there are so-called good actors out there. They portray themselves as good actors, the European Union, the United States, who have information about very serious crimes and even espionage happening in Hungary. But in the end of the day, they think that, these are just relatively unimportant, small, poor Eastern European countries. Who the fuck cares about them? And they just keep this information to themselves. When my mission as a Hungarian citizen is to obtain this information and make it public, because if there's treason, there's corruption, and other crimes that are being committed against my country by Russia with willing collaborators from within the Hungarian elite.
How is the investigation perceived in Hungary? And Holger, then I will shut up and let you speak.
You mean this story that we published together?
Yeah, but I think maybe it's even a little bit wider question. But how would you say what is the actual impact on the society in Hungary, not the top political or the corrupt level?
Right. I mean, it's hard to assess because when we're talking, this investigation is relatively new, and hopefully we will still publish a second part. It's like with every bombshell story in Hungary, because our audience is fragmented. There are those who consume news from the propaganda. What they read is that Szabolcs Pany, the Ukrainian spy, is attacking Péter Szijjártó, colluding with foreign journalists and foreign intelligence agencies. That's how a large part of the Hungarian population is getting information about our revolution. And of course, there's the other part who already knew about this type of Russian influence in Hungary, partly because of my reporting, who are just now even more outraged because I think what we published was finally something that we can call a direct proof. It's irrefutable. And even Péter Szijjártó's reaction was that, as Michael Weiss, one of our co-authors, told this to Morning Joe in this US program, that it's a nothing burger, nothing to see here. It's completely normal that I speak to Lavrov during EU summits. It's completely normal. It's always been our position that we're against sanctions, so of course we work against sanctions. Well, that's bullshit, because no one knew that actually Hungary is taking orders from the Kremlin, because at these EU level discussions over sanctions and sanctions packages, Hungary always presented its objection as that it's stemming from Hungarian national interest, that sanctioning an oligarch is against Hungarian national interest, that sanctioning a Russian company is hurting the Hungarian economy. While at the same time what we revealed shows in an irrefutable way that Szijjártó is at some point even asking for talking points, asking for arguments for the Russians. Please help me argue why this is Hungary's interest. So that's just a mind fuck.
The elections, the Hungarian elections, probably the most important elections in the European Union this year, will be on April 12, so very soon after we publish this recording. The main topic or the main debate or main question of the elections was supposed to be economy, inflation, how people get along in their lives. Is it still the case, or has it now turned to Ukraine, Russia, NATO, European Union angle?
As a journalist following elections also worldwide, every successful election campaign was run on bread and butter issues, as you mentioned, inflation, housing costs, cost of living, food prices, just economic security. In the Czech Republic last year, a government that had quite a good foreign policy track record and quite a good economic track record was defeated because of the sentiments of the people and emotions about the economy were a bit detached from reality. They thought that, the Czech Republic could do better. So quite a good government was defeated. In the United States, the Biden administration, which foreign policy was disastrous, especially towards Hungary and our region and Ukraine. But that government's economic policies were actually not bad, but the people felt other way. And that government was, or at least the Democratic Party was defeated at the elections. In Hungary's case, Viktor Orbán's government that has an extremely bad economic track record. Hungary has not seen economic growth in 3 years. There's an economic stagnation. So Viktor Orbán cannot do anything else but to blame this disastrous economic policy on some foreign conspiracy. And this foreign conspiracy consists of the European Union that's been withholding Hungary's EU funds. Of course, it's withholding because Orbán and his cronies have been stealing it for many, many years. But Orbán portrays that there's a conspiracy between the European Commission and Ukraine, that the Commission wants to give Hungary's money to Ukraine, wants to fast-track Ukraine's accession to the EU so that they could give the Hungarians money to Ukraine, and also blame the situation, inflation, etc. on Ukraine and the sanctions. So he's trying to spin the whole situation in a way that everyone else is responsible for the economic woes of Hungary, not the government that has been in power for 16 years.
But is he succeeding?
According to the polls, Viktor Orbán's ruling party, Fidesz, is trailing the opposition between 10 and 20 percentage points, which is an unprecedented huge lead for any party. One poll was just released yesterday showing that the opposition TISA party has actually widened the gap. To believe that this gap could be closed in 1.5 weeks, there's no precedent of that. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I'm saying that under normal democratic circumstances, it cannot happen.
But we're talking about Hungary here, and I'm sorry to say that. I was covering Hungarian elections last time in 2018. And I think, Szabi, we have to help people who are not in Budapest imagine how Budapest at the moment looks like. Because at that time, it was George Soros, opposition leaders, on every corner of Budapest, the huge posters saying that these people are letting refugees in. I hadn't seen anything like that in my life. What is on Budapest at the moment? What is Orbán telling people?
Well, the government's propaganda is obviously apparent on the streets. We have these huge billboard campaigns. I don't remember if I mentioned, but it's important to understand that Hungary is a multi-party democracy, but at the same time it's a party state, meaning that the ruling party uses the resources of the state for campaigning. This entails using the intelligence services and the counterintelligence to spy on the opposition and journalists, but it also means that they are spending government advertisement money on campaigning on behalf of the governing party. And Hungary is now full of campaign billboards, mostly depicting Zelensky as the villain, but also Ursula von der Leyen appears there. As I described, there's this conspiracy theory that the Commission and Ukraine are trying to steal the money of the Hungarians. The most disgusting part of this is that you may remember that George Soros was also on these billboards some years ago. There was a billboard with a picture of George Soros laughing, and the text was, "Don't let George Soros have the last laugh." In Hungarian, it basically means that if you're winning, then you're the one who's having the last laugh. I don't know if it translates to other languages. But the issue was that Soros was portrayed in a way that it was evoking very directly 20th century anti-Semitic caricatures of Jewish people. And also in Orbán's rhetorics about Soros, obviously he was not mentioning the word Jew, but he was talking about globalist networks, financiers who don't have a homeland, who don't have a nationality, that are conspiring against the country. Fast forward to 2026, we see a very same billboard with the same message: don't let Zelensky have the last laugh, having Zelensky's picture there laughing. What connects George Soros and Zelensky? Both are Jewish. The Hungarian public knows about Zelensky's origins, and for some strange reasons, the Hungarian government doesn't put Ursula von der Leyen or Manfred Weber, head of the European People's Party, who's also a boogeyman. They don't put them on such billboards, especially because they're not Jewish, they're German, and they are also trying to talk and to lure the far-right voters to vote for the ruling Fidesz party. One of their last resorts, how they can win, to lure some of the far-right voters to support Viktor Orbán, and in that regard they are even willing to use these anti-Semitic tropes, which, I mean, I'm of Jewish origin. My ancestors were killed in Auschwitz. I'm not taking this lightly. I know that this would not cross into a physical threat or something like that, but it's just fucking disgusting to have the Hungarian state using these tropes in 2026.
Do you think that this kind of campaign advice could come from the Russian advisors? But like we started this podcast like saying how Kirienko has been put in charge in Moscow for this, where GRU people were assassination plans or like playing this. So like, how can you see the Russian impact on the ground actually?
The Russian influence is targeting Zelensky, and behind the anti-Ukrainian narratives there is a close cooperation with the Kremlin. There have been reports, and I can confirm this, that certain diplomats at the Russian embassy in Budapest, who are affiliated with the SVR, they are holding meetings with Hungarian journalists, propagandists, and also disseminating propaganda content through Telegram to them, and then this content appears in Hungarian pro-government media. This is one level of cooperation, but the fact that Sergei Kirienko has been tasked with this thing and that there have been GRU operatives deployed to help this effort means that they have to meet with someone from the Hungarian side. That's something that we're still investigating, but I'm convinced that there is a collusion also on the level of at least propaganda planning.
Something will happen. The election day, April 12 on Sunday. One side will win, be it Peter Magyar's Tisza party, be it Fidesz. Is that the end of it? Or what do you expect to happen after election day?
I'm going to just share with you some concerns that are based on some, I think, legitimate knowledge of what may happen. First, Vladimir Putin stated that Hungary is receiving oil and gas supplies as long as its government follows the current foreign policy. Because the Orbán government has doubled down on Russian energy dependency, it means that if the Russians close the gas and oil tap, then that could create an economic crisis situation. Well, Hungary is phasing out these supplies anyway because of EU regulations and because of US sanctions. So we should get rid of it by 2027. But that should go in an orderly way. And there's a fear that because of Russia's retaliation, there could be an inorderly transition. There could be a shortage of fuel and heating, which could really impact Hungarian households and the economy. That's one thing. The other thing that, together with you, I've also worked on some stories about Russian sabotage and hybrid attacks in your countries, in Poland, in the eastern flank countries of NATO. For some strange reasons, these sabotage attacks never happened in Hungary, where the Kremlin had a friendly government. Once the Orbán government is out, Hungary will also become a target of such sabotage attacks, arsons, and other hybrid threats, including cyber attacks. I've been reporting on how the Russian intelligence's hackers have infiltrated the Hungarian Foreign Ministry. I believe this infiltration is much deeper, so the Hungarian state's cyber defense capabilities are crippled. The Russians are inside the system, and they could have a very easy way in shutting down, reactors, shutting down power plants. There could be very serious disruption coming from Russia's side. And obviously, Viktor Orbán, once he's out of power, he'll still have his cronies, his holdovers in the Constitutional Court, the president, lots of so-called independent authorities, they can make the life of a future government extremely hard. What mostly concerned of is what I mentioned, Russia.
But let me ask about different scenario, which is also possible. Sabi, what will happen if Orban wins?
Well, I usually describe Hungary's status as a hybrid country. You have an officially EU-NATO member state where most of the institutions like the Hungarian army or the Hungarian bureaucracy, Hungarian administration, they are loyal to NATO, they are loyal to the EU. 70-80% of people working in these institutions are Hungarian patriots who took their oath on the constitution, and that also entails that Hungary is part of the Western Alliance. At the same time, the top leadership of the country is an ally of the Kremlin. Not just an ally of the Kremlin, but also a Trojan horse of the Kremlin within the EU. That has been this hybrid status in the past few years, and I believe that after this election, this situation will fundamentally change. Either there's going to be a harmony in a way that both our leadership and our institutions will be loyal to the Western Alliance, or the other way around, that Viktor Orban will finally transform Hungary and its institutions of becoming allies of the Kremlin. There is a realistic scenario that Hungary would become a neutral country, just like Austria, member of the European Union, but not a member of NATO, and a staging ground for Russian intelligence operations. Vienna is the capital of espionage in Europe. Hungary could join that type of bloc pretty soon. At the same time, Hungary is only important to the Kremlin as long as it's an EU member state, as long as it can be used to basically slow down EU decision-making procedures and to get off Russians from the sanctions list. Once Hungary's voting rights are suspended, once Hungary is left out of these, for example, sanctions negotiations, Russia would have no other interest to keep Hungary inside the EU, meaning that Viktor Orban will also have no interest to keep Hungary inside the EU. So I would believe that a process of Hungary's disintegration from both the European Union and NATO would unfortunately start.
I think these are super interesting times, and I think regardless of everything, it's the best time to be a journalist, including in Hungary, despite of all the pressure that journalists face. But perhaps the last question from me, and then we can start wrapping this up. You said that you're a patriot of Hungary. When do you think you will be able to go home, and then will you be able to actually to cast your vote in the elections?
I'm fully able to go home whenever I want. When we're recording this, I'm in Warsaw, working together with my Polish team on this investigation, just because it's safer to protect my equipment here, obviously. But as I said, there's from the Hungarian authorities' side, there's no real legal threat. It's more of a rhetorical, political attack against me. So I plan to go home and vote at these elections, although I'm a notorious non-voter, because this was my conviction for a long time. Actually, we were together at Landowny's seminar, legendary editor-in-chief of the Washington Post, where he described that because he was overseeing the whole news-gathering operation of one of the nation's most important newspaper, he decided not to vote on national elections so that he can keep a fully independent position, and that he cannot be accused of even personally being in favor of this or that party. And actually I really liked that argument, and because of that for a long time I was not voting in Hungary. Now I'm a bit conflicted, because we're not only voting about parties, but we're voting about the future of Hungary and whether it's going to be in the European Union and NATO or not. It's exciting to be a journalist in these times, but as a Hungarian citizen, it's just fucking sad that we got to this point where basically we have to decide if we want to be vassals of Vladimir Putin or we want to be just a normal country like those around us.
I don't think that there is time for any more questions after this. And on this note, we are going to end this podcast about Szabolcs Pany, investigative journalist from Hungary, who unmasked Hungary's foreign minister as the Russian mole in Hungarian government.
Sorry, I was just one member of a team.
He's also very modest, and we know that. But with us today was Holger Roonemaa from Delfi, and I'm Sanitas Jembergas from Baltica. And see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, and bye.